Welcome to My Key Films, where I ride, hike, and build bikes. Or at least try to. I studied film at UT and NYU and worked in the industry. Watch me struggle so you don't have to. This is the Stumpjumper EVO S-Works. Full carbon, full send. We are 1 carbon rims laced to Industry 9 Hydra hubs. Up front, a 29-inch Maxxis Minion DHR2. 160mm Fox Factory Grip X fork. SRAM Maven brakes levers. Out back, a Fox Float X shock. Hustle Bike Labs Avery RemTech pedals. X01 cranks paired with a Sigeyi power meter. X01 axis wireless derailleur. 27.5-inch Maxxis Ardent. Ergon SM Pro saddle and Ergon grips. SRAM pod rocker controller. SRAM Maven calipers paired with 200mm rotors. Hustle Bike Lab pedals. Fox Float X shock with 150mm of travel. 1UP Components V3 dropper post. So I built a Stumpjumper EVO S-Works all by myself. Tubeless tires took a few tries and a lot of sealant. Forgot a fork part? Yep, it matters. Brakes were a science project. Axis derailleur, wireless drama queen, dropper post, absolute cable routing nightmare, but with YouTube and ChatGPT, I pulled it off. So try it. You might surprise yourself. Let's get to building. The color is satin gloss black pearl, brushed black chrome. The carbon frame weighs 6 pounds with internal cable routing. The suspension is a Fox Float X factory with open and firm switch, 11 clicks of adjustable low speed compression and 16 clicks of adjustable rebound. Large EVO air chamber with piggyback and Kashima coating. The frame has 150mm of travel and 27.5 trail geometry and adjustable flip chip and head tube angle. Here are the We Are One carbon wheels. Let's check out all the other parts I got. Convergent fuse and triad wheels. Industry 9 Hydra hubs with 690 points of engagement. Maxxis DHR2 and Ardent tires. SRAM Maven brakes. SRAM X01 Axis wireless derailleur with new Axis rocker pod controller. SRAM X01 cassette. Robert Axle project axle for my Wahoo trainer. X01 cranks with Sigeyi power meter. 1UP 35mm stem and carbon bars with Ergon grips. 2025 Fox 36 factory fork Grip X 160mm of travel. 1UP component V3 dropper post. Ergon SM Pro saddle. Hustle Bike Lab magnetic pedals. We're starting off by mounting the Maxxis tires onto the We Are One carbon rims and setting them up tubeless. Once that's dialed, it's time to install the rotors and get the cassette on. The supplies I'll be using are 20-inch Minion DHR2 tires, 27.5 Ardent tires, 29-inch We Are One convergent fuse rim, 27.5 We Are One triad rim, stand, sealant and syringe, core remover, tire lever, and a scale, and either several CO2 cartridges or a pump with an air chamber. Alright, we're going to check out how much this rear wheel weighs. Let's check it out. 2.26 pounds. Okay, now let's check out the rear wheel. 1.94 pounds. Alright, the DHR2 weighs 2.3 pounds. Alright, let's see how much this Ardent rear tire weighs. 1.86 pounds. Alright, we're going to install this Ardent on this 27.5 We Are One carbon convergent wheel. So let's see how I do. This is probably my first time doing this. Let's check it out. You want to make sure the tire is facing the right rolling direction as well as line up the logo with the valve. I picked the Maxxis Ardent tire because it's a fast rolling lightweight tire that also has a tan wall and is 2.4, which works well with the triad rim. Okay, I got one side on. That was kind of tough. You have to use some brute force to get one side on. Let's try this other side. Okay. The convergent triad rim is 32% stronger than the previous models, thanks to a unique spoke interface system that reduces fatigue on the nipples and the spokes. The rim offers a smooth ride by fine-tuning radial and lateral stiffness, which helps reduce vibration and an overall ride feel. The rim is made from high-quality carbon that makes them lightweight and strong, without adding any unnecessary weight. The triad rim can pair with tires between 2.4 and 2.6 size. Okay, this is really tough. This is the first time I put on a new tire. Okay, I got it. Whew, I'm sweating here. Okay, I hope that's correct. Let's see. looks correct. Okay, got it on. I think it's correctly done. Let's pump it up and let's add some sealant, okay? Give me a second. I got the pump. I had a company called Custom Wheel Builders build the wheel and add the rim tape. The rim tape is what's necessary to do the tubeless tires. The pump has an air chamber that you can fill up to 200 psi. You can then release all the air into the tire by pushing a lever. Okay, let's see if this works. So I don't know if you can tell, if you can see that, but I pumped. I pressurized the pump with about 200 psi. Let me see if that will fill up the tire. Nice, okay. All right, it worked. I'm gonna pump it up some more. Then I'm gonna take out the air and I'm gonna put in the sealant and then I'm gonna pump it up again. Okay. All right, I got it all filled up. Now I'm gonna remove the core here, and then the air is gonna come out obviously, and then I'm going to put sealant in. So Stans recommends 60 to 90 milliliters of sealant. It says right back here on the bottle. I don't know if you can see that, but it says right there. This right here, I don't know if you can see that. This is the core remover. This here is my syringe that I will fill up with sealant. Turn this little lever, so it's like that. Put this in, okay, here we go. Okay. So here's the sealant. It looks like there's a lot of air in it. Actually, after it settles, it's only 40 milligrams, so I'll probably put twice that. This is the core remover. There you go. Set it on there like that. Get ready for a surprise. Twist this off. Whoa, shit. And there goes all the air. Okay. I should have been hanging on to that. This is only about 30 milliliters. So I'll have to fill it up some more. Open this up. Put that in there. Here's another maybe 20 more, so that's 40. Let's try it again. That's 60. Let's do one more. It's another 30 more, so that's about 90. Let's put this on here. Ooh, kind of messy. Now put the core back on. Use the core remover. For those of you who don't know, tubeless tires can only work on pressed valves, and a core remover can only be used on pressed valves that have removable cores. See this? Put this on like so. Okay. And then now we just pull this lever. There you go. Okay. Now.
All right, that's the 27.5 tire all set up. Just gotta put the brake rotors on and the cassette. So we'll do that a little later. Let's move on to the next tire. Now we'll be installing the DHR2. Let's see how this goes. Got the tire unfolded. We got the WeAre1 convergent fuse front wheel. Okay, on this side is the disc brakes. So we need to make sure that the tire is, okay, yeah, this is the front. You don't want to do it backwards because then you're gonna have to do it all over again. Okay, this is the hardest part. Oh, I got it. Get it on this side. Cool. Not so hard this time. Okay, let's do the other side.
I picked the convergent fuse rim because it allows you to run a wider tire between 2.5 and 2.8. I could have stuck with a triad rim in the front, but I figured the fuse would be better for the 2.6 Minion DHR2. The fuse is only available in a rim size of 29. I researched a bunch and discovered that a wider tire up front will help you roll faster as well as grip and go over terrain much better. The DHR2 is great for cornering with wide side knobs and center treads that features ramp leading edges to improve acceleration. The paddle-like knobs in the center dig in under hard braking to keep the bike under control.
That took longer than expected. This helped out a lot once I figured out how to use it. You have to like wedge it in there and pry it back and forth till you get the tire on. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the next step. All right, I pressurized the pump, put the valve on, put this pump on. So here we go. Here we go. It's got air in it. Feels good. Now I'm gonna release the air. Okay, that's good, I think. Now I'm going to remove the core. Just close this.
If you don't have a syringe, you can pour the sealant in before you mount the tire on the rim. The only issue with that is it could get messy when you mount the tire.
Okay. Fill it up. This is only like, it's only like 10 milliliters. This is nothing. I should have poured it in probably. All right. This is about 20 milliliters. So let me pour this in. So that's about 30. This is another, shoot, it's only at 20. Okay, that's about 50 in there. That's about 30 more, so that's 70. That's about 10, so that'll be 80 total. 80 total. Okay. Put the core back on. That's set to 200 psi. Put this on like so. Okay. And then just pull the lever. Oh, there you go. Did you hear that pop? The bead. All right, there we have it. I was able to get the tires on the new Weir 1 convergent rims. I think they look pretty good. What do you think? The next step would be, I think, to put on the cassette and the rotors. So now we're gonna install the disc rotors. I looked up on Google what SRAM's recommended newton meters are, and it's 6.2. So let's go ahead and get this installed.
You should wear gloves so the oils in your hands do not contaminate the rotors.
Make sure that the threads are going on right.
This was actually very tiring and took forever. You could use a drill. You just have to make sure the screws are threading correctly and not tightening it all the way. Use the torque wrench to do the final tightening.
Okay. There we go. All right, now we're gonna install the cassette. So let's see what's happening here. Let's take this off.
I'm putting grease on the SRAM XD free hub, and I have an Industry 9 Hydra hub with 690 points of engagement.
Now we're gonna put the cassette on. Okay, cassette's on, and then we're gonna tighten this up. This is supposed to be tightened to 40 newton meters. Okay, I think that's pretty good.
I got this torque wrench at Home Depot that I can tighten the cassette to 40 newton meters.
All right, now we're gonna install the rotor on the front wheel. So let's put this on here. And you're not supposed to touch the rotor with your hands because you can get oil or grease from your hands or contaminate the brakes. So you should probably use gloves, but I'm not using gloves. Let's put these on. You want to make sure that the threading goes on easily. You don't want to strip it. If it's like too difficult, that means you're probably not threading it right.
I decided to go with 200mm brake rotors on both wheels because they offer more surface area for the brake pads to grip onto, which results in better stopping power.
Torque to spec, very nice. All right, the rear wheel's all finished. Let's weigh and see how much it weighs. It weighs 5.73 pounds. 5.73 pounds. All right, let's weigh the front wheel. See that? 5.7 pounds.
In this section, I'm going to walk you through how to install a Fox 36 Factory Grip X fork from start to finish. Whether it's your first time or you're just brushing up, I'll cover each step in detail, cutting the steerer tube, installing the crown race, torquing everything properly, and making sure your headset is smooth and dialed. I'll also show you a major mistake to avoid. I chose the 2025 Fox 36 factory fork with 160mm of travel for its perfect balance of control, stability, and versatility. The extra travel smooths out rough descents, absorbs big hits, and gives me more confidence on technical terrain. It's adjustable so I can fine-tune the ride for climbing and descending. The high-end features like the Grip 2 damper and Kashima coating offer precision and durability for long demanding rides. Plus, the 160mm of travel helps slacken my bike's geometry for added stability on steep sections. The tools you'll need for this install include a ruler with millimeters, carbon fiber saw, a Park Tool saw guide, a file, a vise, a bike fork star nut setting tool, a hammer, a strap to hold the fork, grease, 4mm or 5mm heck wrench, and a torque wrench. The bike parts you'll need are a 2025 Fox 36 factory fork, headset top cap with compression bolt, star nut, 1-up component 35mm stem, spacers, top cover assembly, compression ring, upper bearing, plus or minus 1 degree angle adjust upper headset cup for 1/8 bearing, which you'll see in a moment, spherical adapter for 1.5 lower bearing, which you'll also see shortly, lower bearing, tapered tube fork crown, and 1-up component handlebars. On the left we have the plus or minus 1 degree angle adjust headset cup. This lets you tweak your bike's geometry, making it either steeper or slacker depending on your preference. Not shown here is the zero offset headset cup, which keeps your bike in a neutral position if that's what you prefer. For this build I'm planning on making the bike slacker. Over on the right is a spherical adapter for the 1.5-inch lower bearing. This piece is absolutely crucial and you'll see why by the end of the video. The first step is to temporarily install the dropper post so I can secure the bike on the stand. If you're planning on doing any maintenance on your bike, a good bike stand, like this one I'm using here, is an absolute must. The first thing you want to do is add grease to the top and the bottom of your frame. Next you'll want to install the crown and the lower bearing. With this type of crown you don't need to hit it into place. However, there's a crucial step I missed here. Later in the video I'll show you the major mistake I made so you can avoid it yourself. Let me know in the comments if you've made this same mistake before. Now I add grease to the crown and the lower bearing. Next I'll install the plus or minus 1 degree angle adjust upper headset cup. If you're aiming for a 1 degree slacker angle, make sure to position the thicker side of the headset cup towards the front. I made a mistake here by doing the opposite, which I later corrected. As I've installed it now, the bike is set up for a steeper 65.5 degree angle, which is not what I wanted. The Stumpjumper EVO's neutral head tube angle is 64.5 degrees. This illustration shows how the head tube angle changes from slacker to steeper. For a slacker head tube angle, like 63.5 degrees, the bottom of the red line moves forward towards the front of the bike. For a steeper head tube angle, like 65.5 degrees, it moves backward towards the rear of the bike. A slacker head tube angle provides better stability and control when descending, making it ideal for enduro or downhill bikes. On the other hand, a steeper head tube angle is better suited for climbing, which is typical for XC bikes. A neutral head tube angle strikes a balance, making it perfect for trail bikes. Most riders would consider the Stumpjumper EVO a trail bike, but with the adjustable upper headset cup, I can tune it to feel more like an enduro bike. Personally, I prefer the added stability on descents over improved climbing performance. A slacker head tube angle not only feels more stable, but also in my experience helps reduce the risk of going OTB, over the bars. At this point I'm temporarily fitting the fork so I can mark where to cut it. First thing I put on is the adjustable headset cup, then the fork, upper bearing, compression ring, washer, and top cover assembly. As you can see, I've added an orange strap to keep the fork from falling. I compress everything with a rubber mallet. You want to compress everything as much as possible before marking. I had several spacers below the stem and one more on top. Using extra spacers ensures the fork steer tube isn't cut too short. I tighten one bolt to keep it in place, then mark the steer tube with a saw. During my research, I learned you should cut the steer tube 3 mm below your original mark. This allows the headset top cap and compression bolt to properly engage with the star nut, keeping the fork securely compressed. I secure the fork steer tube in the vise using the Park Tools saw guide. I carefully align it with a 3 mm mark, then I start cutting. As you can see, the cut wasn't perfectly straight, so I'm using a file to smooth it out and even the edges. This is the star nut which goes inside the steer tube to hold the fork together. Now I use the fork star nut setting tool to insert the star nut into the steer tube. I hammer it down until it's completely flat. I recommend using a regular hammer instead of a rubber mallet. It's much quicker and more effective. Once it's done, you might need a wrench to unscrew the bolt. Right here is where I make a crucial mistake. Later in the video I'll explain the big mistake and how to correct it. As you can see, the orange strap keeps the fork in place, and now I assemble all the parts and tighten down the top cap and stem. Now I install the handlebars. Start by centering and adjusting everything, then tighten the bolts evenly using a hex wrench. After that, I use a torque wrench to tighten them to the recommended torque settings, typically between 5 to 8 Nm, depending on your stem and handlebar specifications. After your first ride, you'll most likely need to adjust your handlebars to find the position that feels best for you. At this point, the top cap doesn't feel like it's compressing the headset enough, so I add another spacer on the top to help with the compression. However, the major mistake I made earlier is likely the main reason for this issue. Despite the mistake, I'm able to get the fork to compress enough. Finally, I tighten the bolts on the back of the stem to the proper torque settings, which is 9 Nm. Now let me show you the major mistake I made and how you can avoid it when building your fork. When I installed the tapered fork crown and lower bearing, I forgot a crucial component. None of the Stumpjumper EVO Dream Build videos I watched clearly showed this part being installed. The crucial part I missed during the installation is a spherical adapter for 1.5-inch lower bearing. Without it, the lower bearing was rubbing directly against the frame. This can cause significant damage to your carbon frame over time. I noticed the fork didn't feel as smooth as it should, but I couldn't figure out why. In this next part of the video, I'll explain how I learned the fork was installed incorrectly and show you the proper way to fix it. It's a good thing I didn't finish this fork installation video before catching the major mistake I made. So it turns out that I actually installed the fork wrong on this bike. I found that out at Angel Fire when I went to get my brakes fixed at the shop at Angel Fire Bike Park, and the tech there told me that the headset was missing
a coupling or a piece that holds the bearings together. So I was lucky I didn't get hurt. I still rode the bike there because I didn't want to rent another bike, and I was fine. But now we're gonna fix the bike. So let's see if we can add this coupling, the one that I just showed you. Okay, here we go. So this is the piece that I forgot to put on. It's called the spherical adapter 1.5 lower bearing. This holds the bearing in place and it goes under the frame. So I don't know if you can tell, this is the bearing, and the bearing is supposed to go in here like so, like that. I did 17 rides on this bike just with the bearing inside the frame. So hopefully my frame is not damaged. So now I'm just gonna clean this up, and I'm going to grease it up and put it back on. Okay. Let's get it right here. Okay, now we're going to check the bottom of the frame to see if I caused any damage by doing this installing correctly. So let's check it out. So this is the bottom of the frame. It doesn't look like there's any damage to the frame here. So let me see if I can get another angle. It looks okay. So now I'm going to put grease there, and then I'll reinstall the fork. Okay, let's put the fork back on. Okay, now I'm going to line up the bars. So I'm going to put the wheel back on to help me line it up. Alright, I think that looks pretty good, so now I'm going to tighten it down. I've got my torque wrench set to 9 Newton meters. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm just going to tighten this here. Alright, as you can see right here, I also cleaned up the headset by adding this large spacer. I had this, I don't know if you can see, I had this one on, but it's not necessary because this other one below here was already on, so I was doing the same thing. So I just got the spacer, which is a spacer like this size, and it just goes right there. So cleans it up a bit from when I first installed the fork.
In this video, I will show you how to install and bleed SRAM Maven brakes. Installing and bleeding SRAM Maven brakes on your Stumpjumper EVO requires specific tools and careful attention to detail. Here's a step-by-step guide to assist you. The parts and tools you will need for installation are SRAM Maven ultimate brake levers and calipers, the main components of the braking system. Brake hoses, usually included with the brakes. SRAM, Stealth-O-Majig, hose barb, and olive. Necessary if you're trimming the hose. These are typically included with the brake set. Mounting hardware includes caliper bolts and any necessary adapters depending on your bike's specifications. Grease. T25 torque wrench for brake lever and caliper bolts. 4mm or 5mm Allen wrenches for mounting hardware. SRAM brake hose cutter tool or cable cutters for trimming the brake hose to the desired length. 8mm wrench. Needle nose pliers for inserting a new hose barb. Torx wrench to tighten bolts to manufacturer's specifications. The parts and tools you will need for bleeding the brakes are Maxima mineral brake oil, the only compatible fluid for Maven brakes. SRAM mineral oil bleed kit, includes syringes, fittings, and bleed block for the process. Hex wrenches, 2.5mm, 3mm, 5mm, for removing bleed port screws and brake lever adjustments. Bit sockets, 2.5mm, 5mm, for use with a torque wrench for precise tightening. Torx wrenches T10 to remove and install bleed screws. Torx bit sockets T10 for use with a torque wrench. Needle nose pliers to insert or remove hose fittings and bleed hardware. Safety glasses protects your eyes from potential splashes of mineral oil. Nitrile gloves keeps hands clean and safe from brake fluid. Clean lint-free cloths to wipe off excess fluid and maintain cleanliness. Isopropyl alcohol cleans spills and brake components. Alright, let's get to the install. First, mount the front brake caliper. I have 200mm rotors, so I need to use this specific mounting adapter. You may need to adjust these bolts, so don't torque to spec just yet. Attach the caliper to adapter using the appropriate bolts. Use a 5mm hex wrench to tighten the bolts to the manufacturer's specified torque, which is usually between 6 to 8 Nm. Next, you want to install the brake lever. Slide the brake lever on and position it on the handlebar at a comfortable angle. You will most likely adjust this again later. Secure it using a 4mm hex wrench, ensuring it's firmly in place. There is no need to cut the length of the front brake hose or bleed the brakes because the front brake was already the perfect length. The final step to install the front brake is to attach the fork hose guide that comes with your fork. You want to tighten it down with a 2.5mm hex wrench between 0.90 Nm. Just like the front brake, you want to mount the adapter especially for 200mm rotors with a 5mm hex wrench on the back of the rear triangle. No need to torque to spec just yet, as we'll need to adjust the bolts later. Before we mount the back brake caliper, we need to remove the hose from the brake lever so we can route the cable internally. Slide the boot away from the brake lever and loosen the compression nut with an 8mm wrench, then pull it out of the brake lever. Next, cut the hose with SRAM brake hose cutter tool, or cable cutters, and remove the end with the old barb. Use a shop towel to clean off any mineral oil that exited the hose. Slide off the compression nut and boot and save for later. Now we will route the brake hose and mount the rear caliper. Guide the brake hose through the internal routing of your Stumpjumper EVO frame. Attach the caliper to adapter using the appropriate bolts. Use a 5mm hex wrench to tighten the bolts to the manufacturer's specified torque, which is usually between 6 to 8 Nm. Gently push the hose through the frame until it comes out the other end. If you are having trouble pushing the cable through, you can cut the head off a small screw and thread it into the hose end to act as a pull-through guide. Before you cut the hose to length, you want to put on the brake lever boot and compression nut. This is where I made a mistake and did it in the opposite order. Make sure you put the boot first, then the compression nut so you don't have to redo it. Now you want to mount the rear brake lever with a mounting bracket. In my case, I used a SRAM matchmaker adapter, so I could mount my SRAM Axis rocker pod on the same mount. In a future video, I will show you the SRAM Axis rocker pod install. Next, I'll cut the hose to length. Measure the required hose length, ensuring there's enough slack for the handlebars to spin around. You can mark with a piece of tape like I did. Use a SRAM brake hose cutter tool or cable cutters to make a straight cut. Clean any mineral oil that may have leaked out. Now I'll install the Stealth-O-Majig fittings. Before this step, I corrected my mistake and slid the boot on first, then the Stealth-O-Majig compression nut. Next, add grease to the threading of the hose barb, which I also forgot to do. Then screw it in clockwise with the provided hex wrench until it's flat with the hose. Don't over tighten. Now thread on the Stealth-A-Majig olive, counterclockwise or reverse direction until it's flush with the hose barb. Connect the hose to the brake lever and tighten the compression nut using an 8mm open-end wrench. Then you want to use a torque wrench and this provided tool to tighten to 8 Nm. It's very important that it's tightened to the correct specs, as you will see what happens when it's not. Now we will bleed the brakes. Only use maximum mineral oil for SRAM Maven brakes. First prepare for bleeding. Wear safety glasses and nitrile gloves to protect against spills. Screw on the red shutoff valve to one syringe, then screw on the green bleeding edge tool. That's for the caliper to the other syringes. Fill up a cup with maximum mineral oil so it's easier to suck up. Fill the syringe for the caliper with 1/4 of mineral oil. Sorry about the shot, my arm's in the way. Then fill the syringe for the brake lever with 3/4 full of mineral oil. Again, sorry for the shot, I didn't frame it up correctly. In this step you want to hold the syringe upright and pull on the plunger to draw fluid into the hose, then the syringe body. Then you want to cover the tip with a shop towel and depress the plunger just enough to remove any air bubbles, then close the shutoff valve. Do the same thing to the other syringe, except there's no shutoff valve on the caliper syringe. You can get a better visual of this step on SRAM's official mineral oil brake bleed procedure video, which I will link in the description. Next we will prepare the caliper. You want to remove the E-clip with needle nose pliers. Be careful not to lose this small clip. Use the provided 2.5mm hex wrench to remove the pad retaining bolt. Remove the pads from the caliper. You may need to spread apart the pads with pliers to prepare for installing the bleed block. Reinstall the pad retaining bolt and insert the bleed block. You may need to loosen the caliper bolts and work in the bleed block. It will feel nice and snug once it's in there. Now you want to remove the rubber bleed port cover and use a 5mm hex wrench to loosen the bleed port valve 1/4 turn. Then gently retighten the bleed port. Clean any mineral oil that might spill out. Next, install the syringe with the bleeding edge tool attached into the bleed port. You will hear and feel it click. Rotate the bleeding edge tool attachment counterclockwise, 1 complete rotation to open the system. We will now prepare the brake lever. Adjust the lever blade until it's 75 to 80mm from the center line of the handlebar. Next, rotate the contact point adjuster away from the direction of the arrow. Use a T10 torque wrench to remove the bleed screw from the lever. Clean off any mineral oil that drips from the bleed port with a shop towel. Thread the 3/4 full syringe into the brake lever bleed port and open the shutoff valve. Let's bleed the system. Hold the syringe upright and gently push the plunger to introduce fluid into the system. Simultaneously pull the plunger on the caliper syringe to draw fluid through, removing air bubbles. Repeat this process alternating between pushing and pulling until no air bubbles are visible in the fluid. Close the shutoff valve once you are sure there are no air bubbles in the system. Now rotate the bleeding edge tool attachment clockwise until it stops to close the system. Remove the syringe with the bleeding edge tool attachment from the bleed port by pulling straight from the caliper. Use a 5mm hex wrench to tighten the bleed port to 1.8 Nm. Do not over tighten, you can damage your caliper. Clean any spilled mineral oil off of the caliper with a shop towel. Now open the clamp on the syringe at the brake lever. Squeeze and release the lever blade 3 to 5 times, allowing the lever to snap back to its starting point. At this point I kinda rush bleeding the system. The proper way to finish is to hold the syringe vertically and firmly pull on the plunger to create a vacuum, then compress the plunger to pressurize the system. It's difficult to tell if I did this final step since my arm blocks the view. I believe I did because I closed the shutoff valve. Now unscrew the syringe at the lever from the bleed port. Clean any mineral oil brake fluid that drips from the bleed port with a shop towel. Use the provided T10 torque wrench to tighten the bleed screw to 1.6 Nm. Clean any mineral oil that drips from the bleed port with isopropyl alcohol and a shop towel. Remove the bleed block and reinstall the bleed port cover. Remove or replace your gloves to make sure no mineral oil fluid comes in contact with brake pads. Remove the pad retainer bolt. Insert the brake pads into the caliper. Install the pad retainer bolt and tighten to 1.1 Nm. Install the E-clip. Now we will massage the piston. Insert the thin side of the pad spacer in between the pads. Squeeze the lever blade repeatedly until the pads touch the spacer. As you can see, a bunch of brake fluid has leaked out. This is why it's important to use a torque wrench and the provided tool to tighten to 8 Newton meters. I couldn't find the provided tool, so I just tighten it by hand. Squeeze the lever blade repeatedly until the pads touch the pad spacer. I missed filming the final step of removing the pad spacer and reinserting the wedge side to push the pads fully back into the caliper. Technically, I should have re-bled the brakes all over again. For this video, the final step is to install the rear brake hose guide. In an upcoming video, I will install the rear tire and ensure the rear caliper is centered over the rotor and that all bolts are torqued to spec. Today we're tackling the BSA bottom bracket, 1-up bash guide, Sigeyi power meter with X01 cranks, rear wheel with axle, X01 access derailleur and chain sizing, and of course, I'll struggle through getting the derailleur paired and dialed in. Before we get started, here's what you'll need: a SRAM dub BSA bottom bracket, a 4.5mm dub spacer, a bottom bracket tool, a torque wrench, grease or anti-seize, and a clean rag and gloves. Now if you're wondering, wait, what's the difference between a regular BSA bottom bracket and a dub one? Good question. A regular BSA bottom bracket is just a fancy way of saying it screws into your bike and works with different crank sizes, like 24mm or 30mm spindles. But SRAM had to be special, so they made dub, which only fits their 28.99mm spindle, because why make it simple, right? Bottom brackets also come in different widths, like 68mm or 73mm for most mountain bikes. So if you're running a dub crank, make sure you get a dub BSA bottom bracket, or you'll be wondering why your cranks won't fit. The cranks I'm installing are 170mm X01 cranks, but I'm also adding a Sigeyi power meter with a 32 tooth chain ring, because why not make my life more complicated? A Sigeyi power meter is a spider-based power meter that measures how much wattage my legs are actually putting out, so I can see in real time just how weak I am. It's super lightweight, accurate, and a great way to track progress or justify why I'm so tired after a ride. Plus, adding it to my X01 cranks lets me keep the drivetrain I love while getting all that fancy power data, so I can scientifically prove that I deserve a snack break. If you're wondering what app I use to track my power, heart rate, speed, and other data, it's the Cadence app. It's only $40 a year, which is way cheaper than a Garmin computer, and I get to use my phone instead of spending a fortune on another gadget. I'll probably do a video on how cool it is in the future, so if that sounds interesting, leave a comment, because knowing my power output is one thing, but knowing people actually want to hear about it is another. I got this special axle from the Robert Axle project so I can mount my mountain bike onto a Wahoo kickar trainer, basically turning it into a stationary suffer machine. The kicker adjusts resistance to match the terrain in Zwift, a virtual cycling app where I can pretend I'm riding epic trails while actually sweating in my basement. So now I can suffer indoors just as much as I do outside, minus the dirt and sketchy line choices. In the future, I'll possibly do a more in-depth YouTube of my MTB kicker Zwift setup. The axle is 160mm to 172mm with a 1mm thread pitch, which is compatible with the UDH hanger. And if you're wondering, UDH stands for Universal Derailleur Hanger, a standardized hanger designed from SRAM that makes swapping or replacing hangers way easier. Basically, it helps keep my derailleur aligned and shifting smooth, whether I'm riding outside or spinning away indoors. The derailleur I'm installing is the SRAM X01 Axis wireless derailleur with the Axis Pod Rocker controller, which means no cables, no housing, no headaches. Unlike a wired derailleur, there's no cable stretch, no gunk buildup, and shifting stays precise and consistent. Plus, it connects to the SRAM Axis app, so I can customize my shift settings and check battery life, because nothing's worse than a dead derailleur mid-ride. Basically, it's smoother, cleaner, and just makes life easier. Or does it? Cable derailleurs don't need batteries, they're cheaper, and if something goes wrong, you can usually fix it on the trail. So while Axis is high-tech and convenient, some riders prefer the simplicity and reliability of a good old-fashioned cable. So far, I'm happy with wireless shifting. To size and install the chain, you'll need a compatible SRAM X01 chain, a chain breaker tool, and the SRAM B-gap adjustment tool, which luckily comes with your X01 derailleur. For adjustments, you'll need a 3mm hex wrench to mount the derailleur, a 4mm hex wrench for the limit and B tension screws, and a T25 torque wrench to secure the derailleur to the hanger. Sounds easy, right? Well, let's just say getting it buttery smooth might take a few dozen micro adjustments. Get comfy and grab some popcorn, because installing all these parts and dialing in this derailleur might just make me quit being a DIY mountain bike mechanic forever. First, make sure your bottom bracket shell is clean. Use a degreaser and a clean rag to wipe down the threads if necessary. Apply a thin layer of grease or anti-seize to the threads of the bottom bracket shell. This helps prevent creaking and makes future removal easier. Start by threading in the drive side cup, the side with the chain ring. Hand tighten it in a counterclockwise direction since it's reverse threaded on BSA bottom brackets. Using your bottom bracket tool and a torque wrench, tighten each cup to 35 to 50 Newton meters, depending on SRAM's specifications. Be sure not to over tighten, as this can damage the threads or the bottom bracket itself. Next, apply a thin layer of grease to the non-drive side threading and bottom bracket. Install the non-drive side cup by threading it in clockwise. Again, hand tighten it to avoid cross threading. Once it's screwed on smoothly, use the torque wrench to tighten to 40 Newton meters. Now that the SRAM BSA bottom bracket is installed, let's talk about spacers, specifically the 4.5mm dub spacer. The Stumpjumper EVO has a 73mm BSA threaded bottom bracket shell, which means you'll typically need one 4.5mm spacer on the drive side when using a SRAM dub crankset. This ensures the correct chain line and bearing preload. To install the spacer, simply pop it onto the drive side spindle before installing the crankset. This spacer sits between the bottom bracket cup and the crank arm, ensuring the crankset is properly aligned with the chainring in the correct position. Before installing the cranks, mount the 1-up component's bash guide to protect the chainring. Align the backplate with the ISCG05 tabs, place the black washer between the frame and bash guide, and loosely install the bolts with a 4mm hex wrench. Repeat for the other 2 screws. Later, remove the blue chain guide to install the drive side crank, then torque the bolts to 5 Newton meters. Now we will install the Sigeyi power meter. First, use a T25 torque wrench to loosen and remove the chainring bolts from the X01 chainring. Next, align the Sigeyi Spider power meter onto the crank spindle, making sure the mounting interface lines up correctly and tighten to between 6 to 8 Newton meters. Now place your 32 tooth chainring onto the Spider, ensuring proper orientation with the bolt holes. Secure the chainring using the included bolts, tightening them in a star pattern to SRAM's recommended torque, usually 6 to 8 Newton meters. Double check that the chainring sits flush with the power meter for accurate readings. First, install the non-drive side X01 crank by applying a light coat of grease to its interface and sliding it onto the spindle. Before you install the drive side crank, remove the blue chain guide. Next, install the drive side crank. Align it to mate perfectly with the non-drive side. Tighten it with an 8mm hex wrench, then reinstall the chain guide. Use a torque wrench to torque the crank to 54 Newton meters. Before hitting the trails, pair the Sigeyi power meter to your cycling computer or app via Bluetooth or ANT+. Perform a zero offset calibration for the most accurate power readings. Pairing the derailleur with the pod rocker controller. Install a charged battery, hold the derailleur's pairing button until the LED blinks, then press the pod rocker's pairing button. When the LED turns solid, press the derailleur button. Now you're paired. For micro adjustments, hold the pod rocker button until it turns solid green, then use the paddles to fine-tune. Adjustments are small but precise. Release the button to return to normal shifting. Let's install the UDH hanger. First, locate the derailleur mounting area on your frame and align the hanger with the mounting tabs. Secure it without grease using the provided bolts and a 4mm hex wrench by tightening counterclockwise, then torque the bolt to 25 Newton meters until it's snug and flush. And just like that, your derailleur has a solid home. Now you're ready to shift like a pro. To mount the X01 derailleur onto the UDH hanger, first lightly grease the threads, then align the derailleur with the hanger and loosely secure it using a 3mm hex wrench. Then, torque to 8 to 10 Newton meters. Your derailleur is now firmly in place and ready for fine-tuning. Next, we'll install the Axis pod rocker controller. Before that, ensure the SRAM Axis bridge clamp is in place, which I've already installed, as it allows for more controller adjustments. To install the pod rocker, loosen the T25 bolt on the bridge clamp, slide in the controller aligning it with the triangle shape, then tighten the T25 bolt to 2 Newton meters. Now we'll install the rear wheel and axle. First, remove the wedge from the rear caliper and grease the axle threads. Mount the rear wheel, ensuring the rotors are in the caliper. Finally, slide in the axle and tighten it with a 5mm hex wrench. You want to torque the axle between 12 to 15 Newton meters. On the drive side of the axle, screw in the silver trainer component for attaching to the Wahoo trainer. I swapped the stock bolt for a longer one for extra security and added a rubber washer to protect the UDH bolt from scratches. Finally, tighten the screw to 2 to 5 Newton meters. Now we can finally test the rear brakes. So far they're working great. Before we size and install the chain, we need to release the air from the shock and secure it with this orange strap to simulate full compression. That way we'll size the chain correctly and avoid any surprises later on. To size the chain, wrap it around the 32 tooth chainring and the largest cog on the X01 cassette, bypassing the derailleur. Pull the chain tight and add 2 full links, one inner and one outer pair. Cut the chain using a chain breaker, ensuring it ends with inner links for the master link. To thread the chain easily, press the derailleur button and gently spread the cage until it locks open. Next, thread the chain through the derailleur pulleys, making sure it follows the correct path. Connect the master link. Make sure that the arrow on the link points in the direction of chain movement. Align the chain ends and insert the master link until the pins snap together. Before locking the master link, release the derailleur button so it snaps closed, then rotate the cranks until the master link sits at the top between the cassette and chainring. Then, with one hand holding the rear tire firmly, press down quickly on the crank to lock the master link securely. Now let's set up the X01 axis derailleur. As you can see, it's totally out of whack since nothing's been adjusted yet. Get ready to watch me lose my mind dialing it in. Sure, it only takes me 2 hours, but thanks to the magic of editing, you'll only see a couple minutes of madness. I learned to set up this derailleur by watching the official SRAM Eagle Axis video. Link below. Here is a major tip that I wish I would have done before following along with the SRAM video. First, set up the SRAM Axe app and configure your pod rocker paddles. I wanted the top paddle to downshift to the easiest gear and the bottom paddle to upshift to the hardest gear. By default, the paddles were set up backwards, and my monkey brain got totally confused when trying to dial in the derailleur. So to set up the X01 Axis derailleur, follow these steps in this order. Set up the SRAM Axis app and configure your pod rocker paddles, adjust B tension, set the low limit, set the high limit, and finally micro adjust shifting. To adjust the B tension, you want to shift the chain into the second largest cog. Then you want to place the new SRAM B gap tool on the cog. You want the little triangle to align to the center of the jockey wheel screw. To do this, you need to tighten the B tension screw, which is the screw behind the battery. As you tighten the screw, the jockey will align with the triangle like so. Now we will adjust the low limit and the high limit. A great way to remember which is the low limit and which is the high limit is to think about the cassette as a pyramid. Lowest part of the pyramid is the low limit, or largest cog, and the highest part of the pyramid is the high limit, or smaller cog. The screws are kind of opposite of what you would think. The inner screw is for the high limit, and the outer screw is for the low limit. To set the low limit, shift to the largest cog. Then you want to tighten the screw so that it barely touches the outer link of the derailleur, then back the screw out 1/4 turn. You want to position the derailleur so the jockey wheel sits directly under the cog without overshifting into the spokes. This is easier said than done, as I either had the chain overshifting into the spokes or undershifting into the easiest gear. Now we will set the high limit. Shift to the smallest gear. Adjust the high limit screw until it lightly touches the link of the derailleur, then back the screw out 1/4 turn. You want to adjust the high limit screw so the jockey wheel is aligned properly without shifting past the last gear. And this is where my descent into madness began. Obsessing over the low and high limit screws, chasing that mythical perfect shift. Hours passed. My patience wore thin. My main camera gave up on life, and I was left with only blurry 360 footage, like a deranged scientist documenting his own downfall. But I pressed on because I had to.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
What followed was a true test of patience and sanity. The shifting was clunky, the gears grinded, and the chain jammed more times than I'd like to admit. I turned the high limit screw, then the low limit screw, then back again, over and over, chasing the perfect shift like some kind of deranged madman. Every small adjustment felt like progress, until the derailleur mocked me with another misshift. At this point, I was convinced the bike had a mind of its own. and its only goal was to break me before I fixed it. Just when I thought I had entered a shifting purgatory, endlessly turning limit screws in a desperate quest for smoothness, a glimmer of hope emerged. Micro adjustments. Ah yes, the mystical fine-tuning SRAM so graciously provides a last-ditch effort before I completely lost my grip on reality. To micro-adjust, you hold the axis button on the controller until the LED blinks, then shift up or down to move the derailleur in tiny 0.2mm increments. And let me tell you, these microscopic adjustments felt like surgery on a stubborn robot. One click too far, and the derailleur had a meltdown. One click too little, and it mocked me with hesitation. But slowly, shift by shift, the grinding eased, the clunking faded, and dare I say, I was winning this battle. Or at least I was losing slightly less. After what felt like an eternity of tweaking, adjusting, and questioning my life choices, I finally got it shifting decently. Listen to the pure exhaustion in my voice as I accept this small victory.
After a lot of trial and error, I finally got it to shift pretty decent. I wish I could get it better, but this is the best I could do, so let's see how it goes.
It's not as smooth as I'd like, and shifting into first gear is a bit clunky, but after a few rides and some micro adjustments, it dials in much better. With that, the drivetrain install is done. Now it's time for the final showdown. Today I'm installing the dropper post, magnetic pedals, and dialing in the suspension to wrap up this dream build. Let's get into it. Today I'm installing the OneUp Components V3 dropper post, arguably one of the best droppers out there. I'm using the 180mm version, but if you're running a Stumpjumper EVO S-Works, you'll need a 34.9mm diameter dropper to fit the frame. To get this thing installed, you'll need a 5mm hex key for the seat post clamp, a 2.5mm hex key for the dropper remote, cable housing and a cable, because you know, the dropper won't work without them, cable cutters, some grease for smooth operation, and carbon paste, which I totally forgot to use. And if you forget carbon paste, well, enjoy your dropper post sinking mid-ride like a sad deflating balloon, or worse, getting stuck forever. Don't be a fool like me. Paste up. Next up, I'm installing the Hustle Bike Lab Avery RemTech pedals, magnetic flat pedals that give you clipless-like control without the commitment. They're strong, grippy, and perfect for riders who want a little extra security without being locked in. I actually did a full review on these, so if you want the deep dive, check out my previous review. I'll drop the link in the description. Alright, let's get started. First up, remove the dropper post. Now I'm going to attempt to push the housing through, keyword, attempt. Cue the next few seconds of me shoving and wiggling as this thing refuses to cooperate.
Alright, so this part, I was having a really hard time getting the housing to come through the bottom, so I decided to feed this, the wire through the top, and as you can see, it came out right here. And then the housing, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of dark. Let me see if I can get my, let's see if you can see in there. You see that? I don't know if you can see that. That's the housing. I'm going to pull this through, all the way through. Pull this all the way out. Now, I'm going to feed this through. So now, it's going to insert. You can see that. Fed it through right there. Hopefully this plan works. Let's see, and I can get it to the other end. Okay, just keep shoving this, working this through. I pulled the cable through right there, and then you can see that right there. The cable's through, and it's right there. So now, all I have to do is feed this one. Feed this one through like that, and this will act as a guide. Let's see if this works. So now I just hold this.
Well, at this point my plan is officially not working. Time to enter improvisation mode. Let's see what genius or totally questionable solution I come up with next.
No, it's not working. It's not working. Okay, I'm still struggling here, but I tried feeding the cable through this way and up, and then I used a piece of cardboard, I think cardboard, to block this hole so that the cable doesn't go here. And it goes up here, and it comes out right there. Now I'm going to try and put the housing on here and feed it through here and go in reverse. Let's see if that works. Okay, So now I'm gonna try this, see if this works. Feed this through like so. So hopefully this will be a guide. Okay, cool. So, okay. It's kind of all tangled here, but it worked. So now we just have to pull. So we got this through. We just pull this out. Pull this all out. I should pull this out. Okay. So now I need to get this cable into there. Let's see. That might be kind of hard. Let's see. Okay, cool. So I got this. Got that cable on. You can see it. But it's hopefully go through now. Get this out. Take this out now. Yes. Yes. What? Oh no. This is way too short. This seems kind of short. Because this has to go.
Now I'm worried the cable's too short. Will it reach the lever and have enough slack for a crash? Or am I setting myself up for disaster?
Okay. Well, we got the cable through. Okay. So the bushing goes on the end, and you slide all the way through till it gets to this part. Like that. You see that? So the bushing. Let's see that. It's like this. This little jaw. Can you press down? Yeah. Get that bushing in there like so. You see that? That's how it grabs it. Okay, what happens is, let's pull this back a little. We insert this in there, so the cable through. Okay. And this. That's ferrule. Did you see that? That hole there? That's ferrule. I think so.
Alright, time to install the seat. It's not hard, but it takes longer than you'd think. Pro tip, fully remove the clamp, sandwich the seat rails between both pieces, then tighten it back up. Way easier than struggling with it in place. While I do that, let's talk about the Ergon SM Pro, designed for comfort, support, and keeping numbness and pain away. With pressure relief zones and a flat profile for control, it makes long rides way more enjoyable. Now back to getting this thing locked in.
Okay, this is my old bike. We're gonna measure from here to the button bracket. So let's see what that is. So it looks like this. Looks like it is 20 or 19 3/4. That would be 19 3/4 back here. So we want this to come down more. Just a little bit more.
So even though I copied the measurements from my old bike, it still ended up way too high. Looks like seat height isn't plug and play. You'll need to tweak it after a few rides.
Okay, now we're gonna measure how much this moves. So this will probably go like that, but you'll see if that's too much. We just twist around. Let's say we crash and we twist. I think that would be okay. It's a little bit on the long side, but I'd rather leave it long than have it too short. So I'm going to keep it the way it is. So if we make something like that. So now we just have to add the
The little part that goes here, I think it's called ferrule. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll add it. So 1 second.
Next up, I'm securing the cable to the 1-up dropper lever. Here's how it should go. Feed the cable through the hole in the lever. Simple enough? Pull it snug, but not too tight unless you want your dropper to feel like it's fighting back. Tighten the screw to lock it in place, then test it out. Pro tip, if something feels off, trust your gut and work on getting it right. Now that I think I've got it secured, I'll tighten down the grips and the brake levers. Alright, time to test it out. And hey, it seems to be working. Cue brief moment of confidence. Wait, nope, something feels off. Next thing I know, I'm undoing the cable, yanking the dropper back out and starting from scratch. Now it's just me, struggling with the dropper post again. At this point, I'm tweaking everything, pulling the cable, adjusting the housing, wondering if my bike is secretly messing with me. Alright, let's try this again. I tightened down the seat post clamp, hoping this is the last time I have to do this, but knowing deep down it probably isn't. Then it's back to the lever, reattaching the cable, dialing in the tension, and pretending like I totally know what I'm doing. Time for another test. The dropper moves. Kinda. Adjust. Test. Adjust again. Test again. At this point, I feel like a scientist running failed experiments. One more tweak, another test, and wait. Could it be? Yes, it finally works. So if you're installing one of these yourself, just remember, persistence, patience, and mild suffering are all part of the process.
So see this right here? This pulls the cable farther this way or this way, which will make your seat shoot up faster or slower. So you just have to twist this. I think you twist it towards you and it tightens it. I've already adjusted it, but this is what you do to adjust the speed of how high it comes up. Okay. Go all the way down. All right, looks pretty good. The last step, I trimmed the cable with this trimmer here, this cutter.
Also add a ferrule at the end so the cable doesn't unravel.
Okay, it says here torque this to 6.2 newton meters. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. I've already set my torque wrench to about 6.2 or 6.2 actually. Let's see. Yeah, 6.2 right there. And you can tell 6.2. So I'll just get that on there like so. And here we go. There we go. There, 6.2 meters.
Now it's time to put the pedals on. One of the first things you learn when working on a bike. And yet somehow, still one of the easiest things to mess up if you're not paying attention.
Alright, first we'll put some grease on.
Don't skip this step unless you want your pedals permanently fused to your cranks. Then thread the drive side pedal in clockwise, righty-tighty. Tighten it down with a hex wrench, then torque it to 35 to 40 Newton meters. Easy peasy, as long as you don't go full gorilla and strip the threads. Do the same to the left pedal threads, add a little grease so they don't seize up over time. But here's the catch. The left pedal is reverse threaded, so you'll need to turn it counterclockwise to tighten. Yep, totally backwards. Tighten it down with a hex wrench and torque it to 35 to 40 Newton meters, just like the right side. And remember, lefty-tighty, not righty-tighty. Don't fight the bike trying to thread the pedals in reverse. As you can see, I've mounted the bike onto the Wahoo Kicker trainer to make setting up the suspension easier. Next, I'm hooking up the shock pump and inflating the rear shock, starting around 200 psi. Now, recommended pressure can vary depending on your weight and the shock design, but a good starting point is about 25 to 30% sag when you're in your full riding gear. Most riders end up around 1 psi per pound of body weight, but it's all about fine-tuning from there. I hop on to check sag, and yep, we're at a squishy 50%, basically couch mode. So I hop off, crank up the PSI, hop back on, still connected to the shock pump so I can keep fine-tuning without the hassle. Normally you'd have to lean the bike against a wall or beg someone to hold it while you wobble around in full gear, but with the trainer the bike stays upright, and I can just focus on dialing things in. It's a little back and forth, like trying to find the perfect recline angle on a sketchy lawn chair, but eventually I get it right at 25% sag. Just right.
Looks like it's about 225. So I think that looks good. I think that's like about 25 to 30%, a little bit closer to the 25 side. So we'll go with that. All right, now we're gonna check the fork sag, see how it looks when I get on.
Pro tip, bring your shock pump with you on your first few rides. You might still need to tweak it out on the trail once the bike starts doing bike things.
That looks about right. 15 to 20% is what they recommend. That's how it came stock, so I'm just gonna leave it how it is. So that's good to go. So this is the high speed compression, this blue one, and this is the low speed compression. I set them about right in the middle. I counted how many clicks there were by twisting it one way or the other, and then I counted back to the middle, and same for this one. So I counted, like, I think this one's like 10 maybe, so I put it at 5, and this one that might be 18, and I put it like at 9, I think. I'm not sure. But whatever the clicks are, just for now I'm just setting it in the center. And then once I ride the bike more, maybe I'll adjust it more. Right.
I'll be honest, I'm not a suspension wizard, so I won't dive too deep here. Anyway, speaking of upgrades, check this out. New magnetic plates on my shoes from Hustle Bike Lab, upgraded from the previous version. Let's see how they hold up on the trail.
These are the new plates. Check them out. They look pretty cool. And these are my old plates that look pretty beat up. Pretty grungy. Pretty sweet, huh? Alright, we're gonna see how heavy this bike is. Let's check it out. It's about 32 pounds, 32.1, 30, fluctuating between 31 and 32 pounds. Like 32 pounds, I don't know if you can see it, 32 pounds.
Well, that's my Stumpjumper EVO dream build. Yeah, I know, it's a long ass video. If you powered through the whole thing, you should definitely like, subscribe, and comment. With minimal mechanic skills, YouTube, ChatGPT, and sheer stubbornness, I pulled it off. Stick around. Next up is the first ride, first impressions, and some much needed adjustments. We're just getting started. And if you're feeling generous, buy me a coffee. Actually, make it a pizza. Link in the description.